Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Good morning. Enter, rejoice, and come in, or enter, rejoice, and log in if you are joining us on Zoom. We are so happy to be together this morning. We come together by the light of our chalice flame. Please join me in our words for lighting our flaming chalice. If you are joining us on Zoom, we invite you to light a candle or a chalice at home along with us. We light this flame as a symbol of new life, enlightening our way, as a symbol of the warmth in every human heart. Let the lighting of this flame rekindle in us the inner light of hope, of peace, of love. May we share that light with all people.
Good morning. Oops. Now I can take it off and try not to lose my hearing aids at the same time. We're so glad to welcome you to this Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And this might be whether you're joining us here in this room or at home. I am Margaret Alexander, nursery and landscape volunteer, and I've been coming to the fellowship for over 30 years. If this is your first time visiting, I want to extend to you a special welcome. Here are some fond memories I have of this fellowship. Watching Hattie, the daughter of our previous minister Roger, and his wife, who was aged 3 or so, dancing spontaneously as Paul Reiser and Sherry Bricko sang at a Christmas Eve service. Rosie, the wife of another minister, Dottie, instructing us how to plant our growing native perennial garden. And designing a service with Reverend Leah on Octavia Brown's book, Kindred. And recently playing with Reverend Christina's sons, Nevin, then Ellis, in the nursery. Then there's that sermon that Reverend Christina gave addressing her lifelong challenges with her body, allowing us to see a very tender side of her. Below these fond memories is another, or should I say back, or anyway. Reverend Roger one time recommended May Sarton's book, Journal of a Solitude, to me. I thought as I read it, it's okay for me to attend to the introverted side of myself. What a relief. And in the last few years, I've been evolving myself. Now I'm finding I'm on the LGBTQ spectrum as questioning. The Q in LGBTQ can be queer, questioning, and who knows what else. If you're new or reconnecting here, our Director of Congregational Life, Marie Luna, would love to help you get connected here. Feel free to chat with her after the service or send her an email. It's time now to settle in. Take a deep breath. Become aware of your body, wherever you are. Allow yourself to come into this sanctuary so we can be fully present to this time together.
Thank you so much, Margaret. We are gathered together in this space and online from home, and we want to take a moment to greet each other. So if you are on Zoom, In a moment, we will be showing you on our screen here in the sanctuary, so I invite you to please turn your camera on so we can see you and wave to you. But now, if you are here in this room, I invite you to sort of turn generally toward the center and wave. And Adam will show first this side, and then he will show this side. But give him a minute, because it takes a minute. Hi, everybody at home. We're so glad to see you. And that is who is joining us from home. We're so glad to see you all. Hello. We're waving at you if you can't see us. It's so good to be together. I'm so grateful for the technology that allows us to be fully together. And now that we have gathered together, our responsive call to gather is by the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, who is the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and adapted by the Reverend Erica Hewitt. When I indicate like this, your response is, no one is outside the circle of love. Let's try that together. No one is outside the circle of love. We know that hurt moves through the world, perpetrated by action, inaction, and indifference. Our values call us to live in the reality of the heartbreak of our world, remembering that no one is outside the circle of love. We who are Unitarian Universalist not only affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, we also affirm the inherent wholeness of every being. No one is outside the circle of love. We know that things break or break down: promises, friendships, sobriety, hope, communication. This breaking happens because our human hearts and our very institutions are frail and imperfect. We make mistakes. Life is messy. No one is outside the circle of love. With compassion as our guide, we seek the well-being of all people. We seek to dismantle systems of oppression that undermine our collective humanity. We believe that we are here to guide one another toward love. No one is outside the circle of love. We are whole at our core because of the great, unnameable, sometimes inconceivable love in which we live. No one is outside the circle of love.
We as Unitarian Universalists strive to encourage a spiritual stance of abundance, rejecting a scarcity mindset with fear and shame around resources. We take this time each week as a moment of spiritual practice, of taking stock of what we have, cultivating peace when we need to ask for support, and giving with joy whatever we are able to offer. For those of you who would appreciate some support, we are here to help. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Reverend Christina, Reverend Leah, or myself if you are in need of financial or emotional support. It is a joy for us to be able to offer help on behalf of this beloved fellowship community. And if you are someone who is feeling stable and able to give, we ask you to do so with a spirit of abundance. Our offering today is a special collection for our partner church fund. I would like to read to you now a message from Zoli, the minister at our partner church in Transylvania, the Unitarian Church of Deva. He shares this. On the 26th of July, an accident occurred in front of our church's David Ferenc guest house in Deva. A car parked on our sidewalk took fire, then exploded. No one was harmed, but the front of the house was seriously damaged. 2 windows broke, the new gate got smoked, the interphone burned down, and the whole facade is destroyed. Unfortunately, the windows of the guest house were open, so the rooms were affected by the smoke, soot, and ashes, and so we had to close the house for a few days and find another accommodation for our guests. Now, just as an aside, if you know about the history of our Unitarian Universalist faith, the church in Deva is a big part of that history, and so there's a need for this guest house because people flock there to see it. He continues, in a week we managed to clean the house, and so it was functional again. In the past weeks, months, the restoration was slowly finished too. The gate was repaired and repainted, the broken windows were replaced. We managed to paint the interior. We also had to install a new security system. The facade was just plastered, but it is not yet finished. Fortunately, the insurance company was able to cover almost all the costs. The hard part was to accept the fact that we had just finished the work and opened our guest house and had to close and start the hard work all over again. We are truly relieved that we are getting closer and closer to the end of this process. We would like to thank you for your love and support that has defined our relationship in the past too. God bless you, Zoli. So our special collection for today is for our partner church fund, and we will be making a donation from our partner church fund to offset damage from this explosion. To give to this partner church special collection, if you are here in our sanctuary, you can come up to one of the baskets that our ushers are holding in the back. You can also raise your hand if you would like an usher to come to you. If you're writing a check, please note Partner Church Fund in the memo line of your check. Anyone can also donate online or via our text to give function on a smartphone. When you do so, please follow the instructions in your order of service or on the screen in order to note that your donation is for the Partner Church Fund. And thank you. Your gifts are deeply appreciated.
Please join in singing hymn 1053, How Could Anyone? It's in the teal hymnal. The lyrics are on the screen, and the lyrics are also in the chat. How could anyone ever tell you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving
In a way, we're all psychologists. We look at the people around us and we ask ourselves, why are they acting that way? That, my friend, is attribution, and there's a particular mistake that we usually make when we do it. In psychology, we use the word attribution to mean how we explain other people's behavior. In other words, when we see someone do something, what do we attribute that behavior to? And importantly, psychologists have drawn a line between two types of attribution. On the one hand, there's the dispositional attribution, or sometimes called an internal attribution. However you terminologize it, this is just when you take someone's behavior and say that the reason it happened is something about that person. Something in that person's disposition, their personality, their beliefs, their opinions, something about their own set of quirks and traits drove that behavior, caused that behavior. On the other hand, there's the situational attribution or external attribution. And when you make one of these, what you're basically saying is that someone else did what they did, not because of something about them, but because of something about the situation that they were in. Something about the environment, the people around them, the circumstances, any of those things are what caused the behavior ultimately, and not necessarily it being of their own volition. Okay, so what does this look like in the real world? Well, imagine you're at the grocery store and you go up to someone, hopefully someone who works there, and you ask a very simple question: where are the pickles? And the person just looks at you and rolls their eyes and drearily points down the aisle to where the pickles are at the other end. Now, you could explain this person's snotty response in a couple ways. One, you could say, this is just a real jerk of a person, and I don't think that he's any good at anything, right? That would be a dispositional attribution. You're saying something about that guy and his poor personality and people skills made him react that way. But you could also ask yourself, well, maybe something is going on in this guy's life. Maybe he's distracted. Maybe something horrible just happened, and he's not really in the mood to have a pickle conversation with a stranger today. That would be a situational or external attribution. It's not that this person is a rude guy, it's that something else provoked this response that maybe under other circumstances he would have acted differently. The thing is, even though we have both of these explanations available, we tend to overwhelmingly assume that people's behavior reflects something about them. In other words, we use dispositional attributions all the time, even when a situational attribution might be more appropriate. This is what's called a fundamental attribution error, the fundamental attribution error. And it means that we overlook the possibility that people's behaviors are shaped by their circumstances. We'd rather assume that people do what they do because it is reflective of something about them, rather than coming from something more external. So why does this even happen? Well, people have given a lot of different reasons for this, but one that I think makes a lot of sense is the idea that situations are invisible. We see people, we see what they do, but we don't often see the circumstance. We don't see the situational pressures. For example, imagine a man walking through heavy wind. There's a clear situational explanation for why he's walking so weird. It's the wind. But we can't see the wind necessarily. And in the same way, when people are actually influenced by the situations that they're in, we have trouble seeing that influence. So there you go, fundamental attribution error in a nutshell. I have to say, this is one of those topics in social psychology that I think has made me a better person. It's one of those things where when you know we make these kinds of mistakes and errors when we judge other people, it can make you more understanding and open to the fact that people's behavior is driven by all sorts of things, not just the kind of person they are, but the circumstances that they find themselves in. And I think if we can teach ourselves to be open to situational attributions, it might make the world a more understanding place.
Our reading this morning is an excerpt from the book See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love by Valerie Kaur. She says this: I started a simple practice. As I move through my day and come across faces on the street or the subway or on a screen, I say in my mind, sister, brother, sibling, aunt, uncle. I start to wonder about each of them as a person. When I do this, I am retraining my mind to see more and more kinds of people as part of us rather than them. I practice this with animals and parts of the earth too. I say in my mind, you are a part of me I do not yet know. I practice orienting to the world with wonder, preparing myself for the possibility of connection. We all absorb stereotypes, but we can undo what has been done to us. In recent years, breakthroughs in neuroscience demonstrate the plasticity of the brain, that we can rewire neural circuits throughout our lifetime. Experience can lead to structural changes in the brain in a matter of months. And these changes can occur even more rapidly in response to continuous repetition. In this manner, scientific discoveries dovetail with traditions of spiritual training. We become what we practice. It is possible to train ourselves to see others differently, to see no stranger.
Core continues. There comes a point in the aftermath of cruelty or injury when I start to wonder about my opponent. Why did they do that? Say that? Believe that? Vote that way? What is at stake for them? What is driving their behavior? And I want to find out. Sometimes it's not safe for me to do this, but when it is safe, I think about how to listen to their story. One might say, why should anyone try to listen to the white nationalist marching in the street, or the demagogue locking children in cages, or a former abuser? For too long, marginalized people have been asked to feel for their oppressors at the expense of their own dignity. Enough. We have a right to withhold our empathy. She says, no one should be asked to feel empathy or compassion for their oppressors. I have learned that we do not need to feel anything for our opponents at all in order to practice love. Love is the labor that returns us to wonder. It is seeing another person's humanity, even if they deny our own. We just have to choose to wonder about them. I do not owe my opponents affection, warmth, or regard, but I do owe myself a chance to live in this world without the burden of hate. Laboring to love my opponents is how I love myself. This is not the stuff of saintliness. This is our birthright. Listening is also a strategic choice. The more I listen, the more I understand. I am persuaded that there are no such thing as monsters in this world, only human beings who are wounded. Listening enables us to fight in smarter ways for justice. Listening is how we succeed. The question, therefore, is not whether or not to listen to our opponents. The questions are, when is it my role to listen? When am I emotionally and physically safe? When can I take on the labor of listening when others are not safe to do so?
If I could shimmy like my sister Kate, shake it like a bowl of jelly on a plate. My mama wanted to know last night how Sister Kate could do my sister Kay. Shaking like a bowl of jelly on a plate. My mama wanted to know last night how Sister Kay could do it oh so nice. Now all the boys in the neighborhood, Katie could shimmy is mighty good. Well, it may be late, but I'll be up to date when I can shimmy like my sister Kay. Whoa yeah, shake it like my sister Kay. That's right, shimmy like my sister Kay.
Thank you so much, choir. What sweet and radiant mystery. When I was living in New York City, one of my favorite things to do was take improv comedy classes. And during one of my classes, there were these two guys. It was their turn to do a scene together. And the suggestion given to inspire the scene was sorority sisters. Immediately, one of the guys starts stroking his imaginary improv hair, and he starts talking like this, and he says, "Oh my God," he said, "I don't know what to wear to the fraternity mixer tonight." And the other guy in the scene right away adopted the exact same mannerisms and tones. "Oh my God, I know, right?" I don't remember the whole scene that they did. It was more of that. I remember watching it and understanding why it was supposed to be funny, understanding how they were playing off of a one-dimensional version of what they pictured when they pictured a girl who was in a sorority. But I don't remember anything that actually turned out to be really funny about the scene other than seeing these two people just acting silly. And I'll just say my improv teacher for this class is someone who I regard very highly. And he was very much into steering us away from looking for cheap laughs, right? When the thing that was the joke was a stereotype or a cliche. And so after these two gentlemen finished their scene, our teacher asked if either of them personally knew someone who had been in a sorority in college. And they both just kind of shrugged, and maybe, they said. They weren't really sure. And our teacher said that he could tell that neither of these characters that they created were based on any real people that these two men knew. He asked the rest of us in the class if any of us had been in a sorority in college, and me and one other woman raised our hands. Me, who in college had been a gender studies major who played sousaphone in the marching band and every night was rushing back to my dorm room trying to make it in time for Jeopardy. The other woman, a scientist who was also a hilarious improv comedian with the best character faces, the best comedic timing. Neither of us at all resembled these two ditzy-sounding, boy-obsessed characters in the scene, and we never had. Now, this was a low-stakes situation. I don't think that these guys in my improv class meant any harm. I wasn't really offended. Sorority girl stereotypes don't exactly register to me as oppressive. This wasn't an identity marker like race or religion or sexuality or ethnicity. In fact, sorority girl holds a lot of privilege, especially for someone like me who's white. But there's a reason that the scene didn't end up being as funny as it could have been. Because there was no real truth to it. These people that they created in this scene, they weren't relatable or believable. They weren't real humans. And the fact that this was the first thought that came to these guys for their scene, the fact that this was the image that popped up in their head just goes to show how quickly and immediately and easily our brains can flatten people who we see as different from ourselves. Now, I'll admit it's easy for me to tell this story as someone from the group that was flattened and misrepresented in this situation, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about the time it was my turn to do a scene in class, and the suggestion for the scene was that it take place in a gym. And so, of course, I puff out my chest and pull out my invisible weights and deepen my voice, and I go, "Yeah, bruh, we're gonna get swole." Dude, check out my biceps, epic. And then after the scene, our improv teacher asked how many of the men in our class went to the gym, and almost every guy raised his hand. All of them were far more interesting and complex than my silly one-dimensional gym bro.
I'm going to be honest with you, friends. I'm wiped out. The pandemic stress, especially the first year of it, when my husband and I both worked full-time jobs from home with no childcare, is starting to catch up with me. My 5-year-old is getting his COVID vaccine this afternoon, and I am getting my booster, so that feels amazing. But the dragging on of this virus and all the needs for precaution, the decision-making left and right about what is safe, what is inclusive, what is right for ourselves and our institution and our world, it's just been a lot. And I am someone with immense privilege. I'm incredibly grateful for my employment here, the flexibility it has allowed for my children and for their health, for my spouse. But even with all of these wonderful things, this has still been a lot. I also have a chronic illness, which I have shared about before, and it has been acting up in the last few months, which has added just an additional layer of hard. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm fine. But just to let you in to my own experience. I know my experience is my own, but I also know that many of you share many of these struggles. I know that some of you have not felt the same kinds or the same level of stress during this pandemic, and perhaps you wonder why other people are so frazzled. I hope that sharing makes us all feel less isolated, more connected to our own shared humanity. And that is why today I wanted to talk about googly eyes. Because, friends, I saw these pictures on the internet recently, and I laughed so hard. I don't know why they struck me as so funny. Maybe I was just experiencing the right mix of tired and goofy. But I thought to myself, I don't know what I'm going to preach about, but I have to share these pictures in a Sunday service. If you ever wonder how sermons come about, we all need a smile or a laugh right now. That video that we saw earlier of the little girls in Spain eye bombing is just so joyful and silly. I invited our kids in religious education to also do a bit of eye bombing, so check those out when you leave. Here are some other funny images that I found online that made me laugh, and I hope that they give you a little joy too, because Lord knows we need it right now. These were the ones that started me off, the bell peppers. They're just so funny. What is he surprised about? And that guy is just so happy. I just love it. It's so good. And their teeth, it's so funny. Okay, this next one. That Ethernet jack or phone jack, he's just surprised. It just is so good. And then I don't know if that is the washing machine, if that's his tongue hanging out, or I think maybe he's like sick, like bleh. And then this last one. I just love the little, it was called grandfather chayote, was the vegetable on the left. And I just think he looks so sweet sitting up there on that pile, kind of, you know. And then the door handle, it looks, you know, they all sort of have this perpetually surprised look. You know, he's kind of like, ooh. So these guys just made me laugh. And I was wondering to myself, why? Why are they so funny? And so I did a little searching around, and I learned that two things particularly make us get a kick out of these inanimate objects with googly eyes. One is the simple shape of the googly eye. It's very round, and it has that very white sclera and the black pupil, which makes them look surprised. And that's just generally funny for some reason to us. And the other thing I learned is that the addition of the eyes facilitates something called pareidolia, which is the human tendency to perceive patterns where they don't really exist, like the perception of faces in peppers or keyholes or door handles. The other thing that makes me giggle is wondering what the bell pepper is so surprised about. Was it the act of getting cut in half that shocked him? Was she simply surprised by seeing a human face staring back at her? Did they get startled by the dip that was coming their way? What made the washing machine sick? Was it the smelly teenage socks in the load? And I have compassion for Grandfather Chayote, just sitting there on top of the pile, watching the shoppers go by. Did he want to be chosen, or would he rather stay at the store? And this is the other reason I wanted to talk today about googly eyes. Because if we can anthropomorphize or humanize vegetables or appliances or holes in the wall, then certainly we can do that for each other. If we have the ability to see a face where one doesn't exist and wonder about the circumstances of their expressions, then certainly we have the capacity to see humanity in each other's faces and have curiosity about and compassion for our shared human experience. And I have found that because of everything I mentioned at the beginning of this sermon, my own tiredness, stress, worry, illness, that I have found myself with a diminished ability, or perhaps even a diminished willingness to offer grace to those in my life. I'm particularly struggling to offer grace to those who I am in disagreement with, or whose behavior I find challenging. I find myself jumping to conclusions about their intentions, attributing all sorts of negativity to their actions, even when I have no idea what is really going on. And I've also been on the receiving end of this a fair amount lately. I find out that someone is really frustrated with me or sure that I'm mad at them, when it turns out I just didn't return their call because I was sick or something. In the video we watched earlier, we learned about the psychological term, the fundamental attribution error. These days, this is the phenomenon that I find myself defaulting to or being on the receiving end of. The fundamental attribution error is the common, very common tendency for people to attribute internal characteristics or motivation to other people's behavior, but not to their own behavior. That is, if you are short with me at the grocery store, obviously it's because you're simply a rude human being with no social skills. On the other hand, if I am rude to someone at the grocery store, it's because I have a headache, or I'm stressed about work, or I'm worried about that upcoming test my kid has to take. Notice that in this scenario, I am more willing to offer myself the benefit of the doubt because I understand what is going on in my own life, so I attribute my own behavior to my circumstances. In other words, I give myself grace. The fundamental attribution error says that my error is not in extending the same grace to others, assuming ill intentions or poor character, rather than assuming or even just wondering about the fullness of their humanity. Remember the washing machine? I wondered why it was sick. Or the bell pepper? Why was it so surprised? I could generate at least 3 reasons why that bell pepper had that shocked look on its face. Why do many of us struggle to do this with other humans? The short answer is that our brains use shortcuts all the time to save energy. Our brains are these very massive organs, and they're working all the time, and they take up a lot of energy. And so in order to save some, our brains use these shortcuts. The fundamental attribution error, just like any bias in our thinking, is easier and faster for our brains than spending time and energy on curiosity and finding out what's really going on, or even generating imagined scenarios for them. That just takes more time. And when we're under stress, and many of us are right now, our brains get even lazier and more prone to these shortcuts. Now, if we know anything about the other person, then we might have an easier time extending that grace. If the hypothetical person who was rude to me at the grocery store had 3 young children in tow, I might think to myself, wow, that person is juggling a lot right now, instead of how rude. Or if it's your next door neighbor, perhaps, you might think, I don't know much about them, but I do know that they never use their leaf blower until after 9 a.m., and I appreciate that. They can't be all bad. When I was serving in my last congregation, I found myself on the receiving end of some anger that was totally the result of the fundamental attribution error, and it was almost funny how far out it became. When I arrived as the faith development minister, one of my main areas of focus was the religious education program for children and youth. And so I spent a lot of time in those first few weeks cleaning and organizing the RE classrooms and the storage closet, getting everything ready and usable. And then I realized that the outdoor space was falling apart. There were these rusty nails sticking out of the wooden playground, and it was kind of leaning to the side, and it was just really unsafe. In hindsight, I should have communicated more and had more of a process, but what I did was just call together some volunteers, and we dismantled the unsafe playground, tossed it in the dumpster. And then it took a lot of time to resolve some major stormwater runoff issues that were actually causing the damage in the first place, so that we could then rebuild the playground. But then I started to learn in that time period that a rumor was spreading around the congregation that Reverend Christina actually doesn't think children should play. She wants to create a really academic religious education program. And looking back on this now, I have to laugh. Anyone who knows me, even a little tiny bit, knows that I love people of all ages, and that I love to play and have fun. This was so far outside the truth that it was shocking and honestly hurtful to realize that people had assumed my intention was because I was some sort of child fun-hating minister, not because I needed to try to keep our kids safe, and no one even asked me. But once I realized that this rumor was spreading, I worked to correct the misunderstanding, and eventually all was well. Now, speaking of playgrounds that are unsafe and need to be dismantled, ours does here at this fellowship. I'm looking for a handful of volunteers who might be willing to come help us take it apart before it gets too cold. And then we're going to have a fundraiser this winter, and eventually in the spring install some new equipment. Not because I don't think kids should play, but because they need a safer space to do so. So please let me know if you're interested in helping. Now that is one relatively low stakes example of the fundamental attribution error in real life. I bet you can think of examples of when you have done this to someone else, or when you've had it done to you. As Allie said in her reflection, it is a way that we flatten each other into a 1 or 2-dimensional caricature, not allowing the possibility of our full humanity to shine through. It's even easier to do this with people we don't know, the sorority girl, the gym guy, to use Allie's examples, or closer to home, the person who disagrees with me about masks and vaccines. the person who is on the other end of the political spectrum from me, the person who would be counter-protesting when I was protesting. It's easier when we don't know the person at all to assume all sorts of terrible things about them. So I want you to do a thought experiment with me, just in your own mind. Think of one of those examples. Imagine that person who is diametrically opposed to you. You don't know anything about them except the fact of their philosophical or political opposition. Imagine that person in your mind. What pops up immediately? Just think to yourself. What do you assume about them? They're uninformed at best, probably stupid, or brainwashed by social media or a certain news outlet. Or they're just bad people, unkind, selfish, or at worst, evil. You might have come up with other words. Now, if you were paying attention to the sermon, maybe your brain tried to do a run around those automatic thoughts, and maybe you tried to have some curiosity or compassion for them. Good for you. That's the goal. Because if we can do it for a door handle, then we can do it for our fellow human beings. Valerie Kaur, in her reading that we heard earlier from the book See No Stranger, talks about exactly this. Seeing the other as neighbor, friend, family member. She says, quote, "As I move through my day and come across faces on the street or the subway or on the screen, I say in my mind, sister, brother, sibling, aunt, uncle. I start to wonder about each of them as a person. Wonder is her antidote to her biases, which she is wise enough to know that she likely holds about almost everyone she meets. Silently renaming them as family in her mind helps her train herself to see them as fully human, the way I would with my own kin, with strengths and flaws, quirks, and whole lives that impact their behavior. It helps to see them in 3 dimensions. Now, I realize that this is hard. In addition to our brain's habit of creating shortcuts, we humans also have a hardwired tendency to be defensive. Often, when we misattribute behavior to some negative intention or character flaw, when we assume someone is just a jerk because they acted that way, it's because they have done something that hurt us. Maybe they hurt us a little bit. Maybe they truly harmed us. Maybe they're just acting in a way that is not the way that we think people should act. And it isn't directly hurting us, but our brains get defensive nonetheless. And this perceived or real hurt causes all of our defense mechanisms to go up. And it's very hard for us to consider offering gentleness, grace, or wonder. But I just absolutely love what Valerie Kaur says about this. Quote, "I have learned that we do not need to feel anything for our opponents at all in order to practice love. Love is the labor that returns us to wonder. It is seeing another person's humanity even if they deny our own. We just have to choose to wonder about them. I do not owe my opponents my affection, warmth, or regard, but I do owe myself a chance to live in this world without the burden of hate. Laboring to love my opponents is how I love myself." End quote. And in times like these, we all need as much love as we can get. Remember, if we can humanize a vegetable, we can humanize each other. All it takes is to slow down a bit and wonder. If not for them, then do it for yourself. Be gentle with yourselves, dear ones. You deserve all the love and gentleness that you can get, and all the love and gentleness that you can give. We don't always know the inner battles that each of us is fighting, and we do well to remember to be more compassionate to ourselves and to each other. Life is hard right now, friends, and my prayer is that we can each have more laughter, less judgment, and a lot more grace and love in our lives. May it be so, and amen.
Please join in singing There's a River Flowing in My Soul. It's 1007 in the Teal hymnal. Lyrics are also up there, and they're also in the chat. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. And we'll say there's a river two more times. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. Last time. There's a river flowing in my soul.
We are a people of all ages who bring our joys and concerns to this time together. We hope that you experience a welcome that helps you find the connection of mutual support, a spirituality that helps you find meaning, peace to ground you, and a zest for rediscovering life as it unfolds. We invite you to let us be a resource in our common quest to celebrate happy moments, seek healing and wholeness, and continually rediscover whoever and wherever we each might be on the path of existence. For those joining in person after the service, you can place a stone in our fellowship chalice as a symbol of our loving community surrounding you supportively. Or you can join a member of our care team who will be offering a listening presence by the bowl of stones near the back. For those attending virtually, you can share in the chat box whatever joy, concern, prayer request, or intention might be in your heart and on your mind. We place a stone in our chalice now on your behalf. For care and connection during the week, please reach out to Minister Allie or to Reverend Leah, or contact our office. If you would like to be included in our weekly care email, you can call or email anyone on staff or fill out the form on our website. May the joys and concerns that we share with each other or simply hold in our hearts' silent sanctuaries draw us together so that our joy is amplified, our sorrow comforted, and our life journeys witnessed. We now turn our attention to the joys and concerns wider than this gathered community. We allow our mind and heart to reach out in ever-widening circles like the ripples in water. This act of heart expanding might be joyful, or it might be uncomfortable or even painful. Our faith reminds us that stretching ourselves to this awareness is the first movement toward creating a community and a world more filled with love and justice. Our first stone is for the joys, concerns, and transitions that are here among us. As the water ripples out, we add another stone to expand our hearts to the Fox Valley community, the state of Wisconsin, and to our nation. This week we celebrate that the FDA and CDC approved the COVID-19 vaccination for children ages 5 to 11. We honor the scientists that made this advance possible, and we hold all the children and their caregivers in our hearts as they make decisions about vaccination. We add another stone for the United States, as this week our nation will honor Veterans Day. We lift up all those who have fought for our nation in the armed services, and we pray for a future without war. We also add 2 additional stones for our partner churches, one for the Unitarian Church of Deva in Transylvania, Romania, and one for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Banai Banai in the Philippines. We hold the joys and concerns of these communities in our hearts and celebrate with gratitude our friendship and partnership with each of them. As the ripples continue, we add our final stone for the wider world, a recognition of our deep interconnection with those across borders and oceans. This week, we hold the International United Nations Climate Summit, COP26, and we pray for our global leaders to be inspired to work together to make meaningful change, and we hold hope in our hearts for the health of our earth and all who live upon her, especially those in developing countries who are at more risk from the impacts of climate crisis. We enfold all who are celebrating and all who are suffering in the embrace of our hearts, and we commit ourselves to acts of compassion and justice in service to those circles beyond our own. May this moment of silence help to make it so.
Our time together is coming to a close, which means our time to return to the world and our daily lives is just beginning. Our hope is that each week, when we worship together, we provide each other with inspiration and empowerment to connect our values with our actions. Remember, there are always ways to get more connected here, both in person and online, and to live our faith more fully. Be sure to read the Weekly Scroll email newsletter for more information, or you can let us know if you do not receive that email. Check out the back of your order of service for some highlights about activities and events coming up. As we prepare our hearts to leave this gathering, we invite you to ponder what you wish to take home with you. What lesson or idea or theme you will carry with you from this time together back to your daily life. If you're on Zoom, we invite you to type your word into the chat box, and those in the room will say a word together. So a word that you would like to carry with you through the week that you were inspired by today's service for. So we're going to say them all together, a joyful chorus of our intentions for the week. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Let us now extinguish our chalice flame, even as we still hold its light in our hearts. Please join me in our unison words. As we extinguish this flame, let us go our ways with hope in our hearts, with our spirits renewed, and with a deeper understanding of life's mystery. Let us carry the light of compassion and commitment to build a better world. After these closing words, we will hear a postlude song. We invite those of you who want to stay in the sanctuary or on Zoom for a time of sharing and conversation about the themes of the service. Everyone else is welcome to use that time to make your way out of the building to allow for time to circulate the air. Go in compassion and a spirit of wonder. Go in peace, knowing we wait to embrace you upon your return.
I don't think your mic is on yet.
Is my mic on? Oh. Hello to our friends on Zoom. If you would like to share anything that came up for you during the service, please feel free to do so by unmuting yourself or typing in the chat box. You now have the ability to unmute yourself if you would like to share. Thank you for joining us today, friends on Zoom. All right, if we have nothing to share, we'll be saying goodbye in a minute. Take care. Go in peace.
There's apparently an option for a live transcript, which is a good thing. No, if you.
That's a game changer.
Yeah, it actually does a really good job. I didn't see any mistakes when I